Emily. It's nice to meet you.
Emily. So there's one. Do we just have one today?
I think
Hello.
we are expecting a few more, but I'll let them
Cool.
in as and when they arrive.
Yeah. And most of them are actually professional singers or beginning to become professional singers. And our role really is just to help them along that path as they
Emily, it's
kind of
nice to meet
go
you.
fully professional.
Emily. So there's one.
All right. Another
Just
one.
have one today.
I'm Jenna. I'm also, I go to school with Emily, and I'm also a US scholar.
Awesome. Great to see you, Jenna. I think what I'll do then is, since we have got two in the room and maybe some more joining us, they're welcome to say hello whenever they pop in. But for now, I'll actually just open up the session with a bit of a sing-song. This is a very geeky session, as Tori said. But one of my favorite things is kind of tricking choirs into breaking down really complex concepts and just starting to sing them and internalize these concepts. So I have a piece that I've kind of a little jingle I've come up with that really emphasizes the 3/4 polyrhythm. And it's just something to get us all singing. So what I want us to imagine is we're in Victorian era London, and there's some steam sort of wafting up from the sewers of London. So you get this kind of sound. But also we're hanging out in Big Ben. We're hanging out in the tower, and you can hear the gears of the clock kind of ticking back and forth. So we have this ostinato repeating rhythm that goes clickety clackety shh, clickety clackety shh. Just try that out. Clickety clackety shh, clickety clackety shh. So that goes through the whole thing. There's also a really difficult sub-Saharan clave pattern, a 6/8 clave pattern that comes over the top. Do we have any percussionists in the room? Just raise your hand if you're a percussionist. Let's take a look around here. Awesome. So we've got a few people that are percussion inclined, perhaps. But this is not for the faint at heart. It's kind of a difficult clapping pattern, but it goes like this. See if you can join in. So it goes 1, 2, 3. So if that's like, you're like, whoa, too difficult for me, go ahead and just snap on beats 2 and 4, or click for our UK friends. Clicking on beats 2 and 4, very, very easy. So I'll start this track off. I've actually got a loop track in the background, and then we can just add the parts in one by one. So we'll start it off like this. We start off with that ostinato thing. Just join in on that. Then snapping on beats 2 and 4, like this. And then that clapping pattern. Try to do that, but if you can't, just snaps. It's just fine. Next up are altos, the first part to join in. Take that part over altos. And now our basses are next. Try that out, basses. And then the Big Ben theme in the sopranos. All the sopranos. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. You all know that? Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. Try that sopranos. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. The next part is the tenors, who mostly harmonize that in parallel motion, but one note is different. Sounds like this. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. Try that out, tenors. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. Ding dong, ding dong. And then one more part for our divas in the room, high sopranos, a little descant melody that goes over the top. It goes like this. Try that out. Parts. Just going to bring them all down. Tenor, alto, bass, soprano, 2 soprano parts. Next up, Big Ben is going to toll. So you can pick any note in the major scale besides the major 7th or T on the word dong. It's going to toll 4 times. Dong, 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 dong. And back in again. Back into those parts we learned earlier. Big Ben is going to toll again. This time it's going to toll 8 times. So you can pick any note in the key besides the major 7th. Here we go. Dong, 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 dong. And back in one more time. Song out, we're all going to join in on that melody, the Big Ben melody that goes, the one we all know. Ding dong, ding dong. Everybody on that part. Ding dong, ding dong. Either octave is fine. Ding dong, ding dong. Last time through. Ding dong, ding dong. Just watch me. Ding dong, ding dong. Awesome. Give yourselves a round of applause, guys. That's a digital sing-song. Quite difficult to do, I think, you know. So kind of the best we can have besides live from London concerts and the stay-at-home things as well. So thanks for joining in. That was a little exercise that I really like to use to get choirs thinking about polyrhythms and kind of this this sub-Saharan African 6/8 kind of groove pattern that we have quite a bit. This like you can either count it in 4. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, or in 6/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we have that pattern in the bass, doom, 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 that goes over the top. So actually, it's some really complicated stuff going on, but it's much more easy to internalize just because it sounds kind of nice and groovy and poppy. What I'm going to talk about today is actually not rhythms mostly, although we'll get into some polyrhythm things, but it's mostly about intonation and psychoacoustic phenomena. So why things actually sound good to us in choral music. We can get quite deep into this and quite geeky, but I just want to start with kind of thinking about intonation the way that we approach it in Voces 8, which is using this system called the harmonic series. And the harmonic series is really interesting because it's actually just the way that nature occurs around us. Also, I'll be doing some sharing screen as well, but for now I'll just kind of talk at you for a second before we set up, give you a picture of the harmonic series. So for me, harmony is a very multi-sensory experience. It's something that isn't just aural. We talk a lot about, oh, make sure that third's a little bit higher or lower, that fifth needs to be higher. But actually, it's less about thinking about, oh, I need to make this, extra bright or flat, but it's more about the way that it feels sometimes, the way that it resonates in the body. Because intonation and temperament, the way that we tune things, really affects us all on an actual a mental level, an emotional level sometimes. When something is out of tune, it really disturbs us and causes anxiety. I'm not sure how many of you are horror movie watchers or just thrill seekers, but in many of those horror movies, things often start with this kind of building, this like rumbling, a dissonance that happens in the strings or something, and there's a big glissando that happens, and you know that the bad guy's about to jump out. There's going to be an axe that's thrown or something scary. And so that kind of thing, it really does affect us on a very, it scares us almost. It's anxiety inducing, these things that are very clustery and out of tune. And then when something's in tune, it can be really satisfying in a way that actually sets off endorphins in the brain. If anybody here is a barbershop nerd like I am, I really got into barbershop singing specifically for that. And I mean the American style of barbershop, where there's 4 parts, a lot of dominant 7th harmony, and often these barbershop tags, the things at the very end of the barbershop piece where everybody's kind of screaming super loud chord and the audience is up applauding on its feet before the chord even finishes. And also maybe even when we like visit spas, things like that, you have these really in tune sonorities that just kind of sit there and we just feel so relaxed because it's so in tune. So I can certainly make everyone feel really uncomfortable if I were to sing a really out of tune note. Let me just pick one here. If I were to go like this, for instance, and just sing. Not a very nice sound. It's probably distorted in your speakers too. Let me just turn it down. If I yeah, thumbs down. If I went like it's just not a very pleasant thing. It kind of makes your skin crawl. Like, ooh, like sing a little bit higher, Blake. Come on, get up there. So it really does affect us on an emotional level. I think it's something that is totally paramount for us as performers, but also as educators, composers, especially as music therapists as well, because it does affect the brain so much. Music therapy is a new kind of a new career that's opening up for a lot of people, and you can actually get majors in it as well at universities. But it really defines our music. So if intonation is not something we're talking about, because it does get old sometimes to just keep on talking about intonation, it should be something we're talking about feeling, the way that it makes our bodies feel, I think. We did a poll recently in Voce about how much time we spend on intonation and rehearsal, and answers in the group range from 50% to 70% of rehearsal time is spent on intonation. So it's literal, the fine tuning, it's literal fine tuning for us, the cherry on top, I think, that makes the Voce sound really that magical, I think, to listen to. It can really, you can get sick of it. Like I said, if you talk about it too much, you get really tired of talking about tuning chords. But to be fair, in Voce, we often come with all the music totally learned. So we show up to the rehearsal with an expectation that everybody has all the notes down. There's no note bashing that happens in the rehearsal on the piano or everything. So we simply sing the music, and we talk about phrasing, and we talk a lot about intonation. The great thing about the human voice is that we have kind of infinite pitch capability. We know that the human voice is one of the most complex, versatile, expressive instruments in the world, kind of like the cello in that way, but even more expressive than the cello because we can add text as well. But like the cello, like many stringed instruments, we also have this ability to sing between the notes on the piano. We can sing da, or we can sing da 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 da. All these little baby notes between the notes, and we can slide between them. We can go and find all those areas that cause discomfort in between. So singers are not bound to the pitches on the piano. We have the ability to sing between them. So this concept between the notes, what do you mean, Blake? Well, the thing is, there's this amazing system that I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with called equal temperament. And if you're not familiar with that system, you've definitely heard it before. It's the system that most everything is tuned in these days. The pop music you hear on the radio is all going to be tuned in the system of equal temperament. Pianos are all tuned in equal temperament. And what that means is that the octave, which is the da, that octave that we're all familiar with, is divided equally into 12 perfect semitones, 12 perfect little pitches that really defines our Western music. And it's a great system. It's like super well laid out. It's kind of characterized everything that we listen to, but it's actually not at all in tune with the way that nature resonates around us or even within us. That would be the system called just temperament, the just system of tuning. And really in Voce, we focus on those two systems. We have the equal tempered system, that's the temperament of the piano, the tuning of the piano. And then we have the just system, which is the system that the universe is kind of tuned in, the harmonic system, the way that sound naturally occurs in nature. It sounds a little bit hippie-ish, I realize. Some of you are like, okay, well, that's a bit crazy. And some of you are probably nodding your heads like, oh, dude, I know all about this harmonic stuff, like whatever. But I want to make sure that we all kind of get a grasp of it. So the harmonic series, like I said, is the series of notes that occurs whenever we sing a note. And it's physics, it's math, electricity, astrology. Any of you astrology people out there probably know about harmonics. It's even polyrhythms, but it's the way that vibrations organically occur in nature, the natural music of our universe, if you will. And the idea is that the fundamental frequency that I'm singing or playing, or if I happen to be tapping a glass, the fundamental frequency of that note contains within it the shades of a lot of different extra notes. And they fit into that sound, they characterize it, and it makes up the way that we perceive it. So the reason that this sounds like me tapping a glass is because the harmonics of it sound like I'm tapping a glass. There's certain harmonics that are accentuated. When I sing, that sounds like an ah vowel with a human voice because the harmonics are accentuated. So I'm just going to share my screen with you really quickly about what this looks like, the harmonic series. Let's see here. We want students. So, can you guys see this? Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Great. So this here is the harmonic series. So the idea is this low note here, this C, if we're a bass singing a low C, way down there. And then the note that's above that is also the same C. And then we have a fifth that occurs above that. And these sounds make up that human voice, or just any sound in general. So we have first this octave, then the fifth above that, then another octave on the C here, and then we get our first third appearing in the harmonic series. And that's going to be negative 14 cents lower than the one on the piano. Some of you probably heard the system of cents before. A lot of directors actually kind of misuse it. Like when a singer's singing really out of tune or something, or when the tenor section is flat, the director will say, guys, you're just, maybe 2 cents flat for my money or something like that. But it's really misused because the way that cents work, it's kind of like percentage. There's 100 cents in every single semitone. Every single one of those da 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 da. There's 100 cents between every one of those little notes. And if we're 14 cents lower than the one that's on the piano, then that's 14 cents of the way down to the E flat. If this is an E, we're 14 cents of the way down to the E flat. So just a small amount. It's not very much at all, but it's enough to kind of hear the difference. Then we get the fifth appearing. The seventh here, this B flat that occurs from the sound of this low C, is actually quite a bit lower than the one on the piano. It's negative 31 cents lower than the one on the piano. So that's almost a third of the way down to an A. And these are very small adjustments, but I just want to play an example of what that sounds like, because there are people that can accentuate harmonics with their voice. You've probably maybe heard some people that can harmonic sing. It kind of sounds like, and what you're listening for is these whistly kind of tones that appear on top there. It's for those of you that haven't quite tuned your ear to the sound of harmonics yet. There are people that can accentuate it even more, but what you're listening for are those whistly kind of sounds like way up there, actually an octave higher than that. There's a singer that I want to introduce you to that is really good at it. Her name is Anna Maria Hefele, and she, I think, has done some things at ACDA as well, American Choir Directors Association conferences. And she's really, really good at accentuating these harmonics in the voice. She can also do this thing called polyphonic overtone singing, where she sings different notes and then accentuates the individual harmonics. So actually you get this kind of contrary motion happening. So I'll just play an example of what that sounds like. I want you to listen out for those whistly kind of notes that appear. Pretty crazy stuff. And then at the end, you can hear outlining this triad that appears right here, the C, E, and G. And that's quite easy. We can all actually try to do that. If we all turn our microphones on mute, make sure your microphones are on mute. And I really like to approach the sound with the American R, that kind of sound. And maybe for basses, you do down here, R. So you're kind of like, R, matey, that kind of sound. And really close it down. And then what you want to do is adjust the embouchure, adjust your lips ever so slightly to change the sound. So you should be getting something like, and that's what you're aiming for, is isolating these little baby notes that are occurring in the harmonic series. What those are harmonics. So the point is that they're always present. We're just emphasizing them with certain vowels But every single time we sing, we're aiming to fit into these harmonics here. So within Voces 8, it looks a little bit different because what we're trying to do essentially is fit in with the sound that Johnny makes on the bottom. So we have this system of temperament called, we talk about the pyramid of sound quite a bit, where the basses are the fluffy, the kind of the loudest section. They're the ones that can produce the most noise. And then we're obsessed as we move up to super clear, very glassy sopranos, that perfect, aesthetic that we are obsessed with in choral music. And it doesn't work for everything. You wouldn't want to do that in like Mendelssohn or something like that. But for just tuning chords, Eric Whitacre, that kind of thing, we're obsessed with the super clear soprano sound. And the reason is because that's actually quite physical. It exists I'm talking about physics in general. So what Johnny does is when he sings this low C here, if you look at the harmonic series, he sings that low C with a bunch of harmonic richness. So it's a very complex sound. And as we move up in the ensemble, for instance, if the tenors have this E here, something like that, it has to become a little bit less complex and a little bit clearer. So as we get up to Andrea, who sings the top part, the high soprano part, she's really trying to exist solely as close as she can to an overtone. So she's trying to actually produce that harmonic, that very clear whistly sound on top. And she actually kind of has the hardest job because the difference between hertz changes as you move up. So when she's singing A440, that note that we're all familiar with, A440, and then she sings G sharp 415, there's 25 hertz difference between those two notes, that semitone. Johnny on the bottom, when he's singing A110 and G sharp 104, if you do your math, there's only 6 hertz difference there. So I kind of think the bassists sometimes can get away with murder. They have a little bit more kind of allowance to mess up in between that margin of error. Whereas the sopranos really have a lot of different notes to choose from. There's lots of different hertz to play with as you move up. So it becomes really important for the sopranos to listen down to the low notes and try to just fit in with those harmonics. In the end, I think the takeaway for this whole session really is that I want you to think about not trusting your ears sometimes, but actually trusting your body and the way that it feels to sing these chords. So as we move down here, we have we can actually build a scale with the harmonic series. Just a diatonic scale, a major scale. So you'll see here, this is the exact same chart we had before, and we have all the little individual markings of how flat or sharp things have to be in order to tune into the harmonic system. But we just are simply stealing them and creating a scale. We get our D natural from this one that's plus 4 cents. The 9th harmonic gives us a D natural, or the second scale degree, if we're in C. But you can move this around. The C is a movable feast. You can move it to A or B, whatever note you want. The E appears right here. Our 5th harmonic is an E, which is negative 14 cents, lower than one on the piano. The F is a little bit trickier because in order to get an F, we actually have to approach it from this tonic here, this C natural, and then drop it a perfect 5th. And we know that the 5th is 2 cents higher than the one that's on the piano. So we simply just subtract that 5th, and then the 5th becomes, the F natural, that 4th, becomes 2 cents lower than the one on the piano. So we're just making that perfect 5th between F and C. So that just has to lower ever so slightly. 2 cents is an incredibly small amount. Like, we talked about 14 cents. 2 cents is like, it's just an eyebrow raise. It's just a matter of kind of thinking of the note a little bit higher. It's 2% of the way to the next note, 1/50th of the way to the next note for you fraction people out there. With a G, we get from this perfect 5th that occurs, that's 2 cents higher than the piano. The A is also kind of a movable thing that we can have because we can either tune the A as the 3rd of the 4 chord. And don't worry if you don't understand this stuff. I'm just kind of explaining for the nerds in the room. You can either get that A from the 4 chord by syncing it ever so slightly down, and that would be 16 cents lower because the thirds have to be 14 cents lower, and we know that 4 is -4 or -2 cents. Or the problem with that is it sounds really bad in like an added harmony kind of thing if we have a really low 6. So if you have like kind of a C add 6 chord, like do da da do, it just doesn't sound very nice to lower that third. So then we can brighten it ever so slightly. But the B natural, our major 7th, comes from way up here in the harmonic series, this 15th harmonic, which is -12 cents. Also happens to be the same number that you'd use if you were tuning it on the 5 chord, the 3rd of the 5 chord being -12 cents. So that's a lot of information. You don't have to understand that, but basically all you need to know is that we can develop a major scale from the harmonic series, which is incredible. So you can tune any triad basically off this harmonic series. This is what we try to do in Voce. We try to tune them all in the just system. Before I move on to the next bit, I just want to get a sense of what this sounds like. What is the difference between just temperament and harmonic temperament? Can I actually hear the difference? Well, hopefully you can. It starts with our fifths. So the fifths are a little bit hard to decipher to hear the intonation. But I'll just play an example. The first one here is a just fifth, so the one that's based off this harmonic series you see on your screen. And the second one will be the equal tempered fifth, the one on the piano. That's just a little bit lower. So we're talking about a margin of 2 cents, 2% of the way to the next note. Here's what a just fifth sounds like. And here's what a harmonic fifth sounds like. Or sorry, this is what an equal tempered fifth sounds like. So most of you are probably thinking, I don't really hear the difference in that, and that's okay. That one's quite hard to decipher. But I'll have you listen one more time, and what I want you to listen for is a phasing that occurs in the equal tempered version, the one on the piano. Because it's out of tune with nature, it's not looping into its own waveform in the same way that a just fifth would, this harmonic fifth would. So you might hear a slight phasing, kind of like that slight sense of the looping isn't exactly lining up. In the first example I'll play, though, you'll hear that just it's pure and it's beatless. That's one way we describe just harmony. Justly tuned harmonics are beatless sonorities. So you just hear, it almost sounds like it's just part of the same sound. It should just be that low note, and then the note that's above it just fits into the bottom one. So here's the just version. This should be totally beatless, and the second version will be, you'll hear a little bit of phasing. So here's the first one. And then the equal tempered version. You might hear a kind of sound. The first version, beatless, just intonation. And then maybe you can start to hear that wave kind of just kind of going. It becomes really apparent, though, as we move up in the harmonic series and we get this third, this negative 14 cents third that occurs naturally. So here's what a triad sounds like do, ba, ba, in that just system. So it's really pure, it's beatless, but that third is actually quite a bit lower than the one on the piano, full 14 cents. Not a huge amount, but it's noticeable. And here's the sound of the one on the piano, our equal tempered system being sung. So pay special attention to where that third is placed, because in the first version, it's kind of doo, in the second version, it's da, way up there, a little bit higher. And once again, we're listening for that beating sensation, that sort of wave, that phasing. So I'll play the first example, which is the pure version, the harmonic version. And then I'll go to the second one, which is the equal tempered version, the piano version. Here's the first one. And then the equal tempered. So the just version. And the equal tempered. And what you're listening for is that phasing, that kind of going in and out. So in this version, it almost sounds to me like a chorus effect, like as if there were more people singing. You hear that kind of that staticness that just kind of vibrates in the second version. I'll play them back to back one more time. Listen for that sound. So the first one's the pure version, and then the one on the piano. So that's kind of where we begin to recognize that this system is quite a bit different. But it really, really becomes apparent when we get to this negative 31 cents seventh on top. This is for the super geeks out there. And this sounds like this. So a dominant triad. This is the kind of the barbershop triad that we're all familiar with. Do, 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 do. That barbershop kind of jazz sound. And that sounds like this. So that is the sound of the harmonic seventh, that really, really low flat seven. And here's the one on the piano, the equal tempered seventh. So once again, I'll play them back to back. I really love back to back samples. I'm kind of like I love going to like breweries and sampling beer flights. They also have, you can sample like the IPA next to the pale ale, and you really can taste the differences in between those two things. They now have coffee flights, espresso flights, which I'm kind of like really geeking out about because you have those different roasts of espresso, and you can actually taste the subtleties in them. I really love those subtle differences. So I'll play these back to back, just like you're kind of at the brewery sampling IPAs and pale ales. And the first one is the harmonic series, and the second one is that the equal tempered version. So here's the harmonic one. And the equal tempered. So the just one. And the equal tempered. So at this point, it really does sound a lot different. So the first version is pure and beatless. It just rings in nature. The second one is much more, you get that vibrancy that happens in the chord. And it's kind of an aesthetic thing. Like, it's sometimes you want that second option because it has more life in it sometimes. I just want to experiment with you guys, just talking about the triad here. So we get this just triad. And I want us to just all have a little play with the third. So what I want you to do is start on a third that you would kind of assume that it feels great, one that's quite high, the one on the piano, ta, and then just sink it down until you feel like it kind of really locks with that harmonic series. And actually kind of flirt with danger here. I want you to get into the realm of minor third. So instead of going da, I'll just do an example here. So if we just have this fifth, you actually want to make yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable here. So you go. Sorry, that's the third. I want the fifth. Give me the fifth. Here we go. And find the spot that it really feels good. But I'll just put this on loop. What I'll do. And you can just play around. I want to make sure that we get a full loop here. All right, here we go. So just have a play and start on the third that you think is the correct third, and then just move it down, and then move it back up a little bit, and just play around. Here you go. 1, 2, 3. Going for this note here. Great. So I really love these kind of exercises. When I'm someone that kind of I harmonize like with my toothbrush and with the microwave and all that kind of stuff. And whenever there's a drone happening, I'm constantly kind of moving up and down and just playing around with how that feels. Because really, when we think about singing between the cracks, between the notes on the piano, we have to kind of get accustomed to that uncomfortable sensation of it being, a little bit lower than we might think. But the trick with this harmonic series, this just temperament, is that it actually should feel quite natural because it is the way that nature rings. So when we sing that third, you're aiming for something that is just a little bit, a hair lower than the one that you might think. And just experimenting of where that actually lies. So this is a great system. We love how it feels, but it can absolutely backfire. It doesn't always work. And this is the reason that often choirs sort of migrate with pitch. You can start in one key, then all of a sudden, by the end of the piece, we're in a different key entirely. It can even happen over the course of 4 bars. So I've got 2 examples here. We'll look at this one first. Actually, you know what? Let's just look at this one. It's better. Just move on. So this is we have this chord here, this F chord. Then we move to a D7 in the next beat. And first of all, I'll just play an example of what it sounds like, this first example in C. If we just tune to this progression, totally based off of the basses, who are at 0 axis the whole time. So every note that they sing, they're sticking with the note that's on the piano. It doesn't change at all. But the parts around it are going to have to shift quite a bit. The sopranos are going to have to start at a C that's just a little bit high, and then to tune that seventh, that dominant seventh on the D7 chord, the sopranos will have to sing a C that is way lower than the one that they just sung. So let me just get to that example here. sounds like this. Let's just sing along with the soprano part. If you're a soprano, you can sing it at pitch. If you're a bass, you can sing it down, way down here if you want. Or tenors can be up here. Ah, that's the part. Just goes right up the scale. Here we go from the top. Soprano's way up there. Now the crazy thing is, if I isolate just the soprano line, and you wanted to tune this in the just system, you'd be sounding like this. So if we listen to those first two notes, it kind of makes you uncomfortable how far that has to sink to tune with the bottom parts. I see a lot of faces just like, whoa, man, that's out. But in the context, it sounds really nice. The problem with it is if we decided that the soprano part was a melody, you know, that melody that we all know, da 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 da, I'm just kind of making that up, but if that was a melody that we all recognize, like something like Danny Boy, you know, a melody that we all love and have sung as children, it would sound really weird to the ear for someone to hear da 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 da. It just wouldn't sound very nice. So what we could do is this example here at D, which is that the sopranos stay the same in that first chord, and then the other parts are going to have to share each other's notes here. So they're kind of stealing each other's notes across the chords. But just pay attention especially to the soprano part, because what happens is if we want to sing that same C in the just system, then the chords underneath it have to come and rise to meet that, to make that perfect temperament. And what happens by the end of it, the end of the four bars, is that we've risen in pitch quite a bit. So that sounds like this. So we ended there, and we began there. Quite unsettling, I think, to hear those two different temperaments. And this is what happens quite a bit in choral music, is that we're trying to tune things based on the sensation, the way that it feels in the body, the thing that feels most right. And then a few bars later, we're completely out of tune. The whole choir has sunk or risen because we're just trying to tune those perfect harmonies. And it's really fascinating to me. So in Voce, what we try to do is tune triads in that just system, especially at the ends of pieces and things like that. We're trying to make those thirds nice and low, keep the fifth just a little bit high. But we're not trying to do it the entire time, especially for extended harmony. Anything that has like any jazz extensions, we get into sharp 11, flat 13, any of these notes, we're not thinking about the just system anymore. We're just trying to temper it, trying to tune it off the piano. Just as a quick example, this is what would happen if we decided to tune Girl from Ipanema, that classic Jobim tune. We try to tune it off the just system. So this is just for humor's sake here. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually stealing, once again, borrowing those notes on the top. The chord will invert each time, and then we're just going to move that top part. That top line will share the notes each time. So it'll sound like this. by the end, we're incredibly flat. We're minus 35 cents flatter than where we began. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. We just don't try to do that in Voces 8. I wouldn't recommend trying to tune super altered extensions and things within that just system. If you want to hear an example of it done, I'll say successfully, check out Jacob Collier's track that we actually did with him called, what was it? Home Is, which is the opening of his Jesse album. And that whole thing is, we attempted to try to tune it in the just harmonic system. So that's extensions up to like the 11th and 13th. All of that is rooted in harmonics. And so you get moments that just sound kind of like a microtonal piece. And there's actually a moment as well where the piece goes from A equals 4 to 9, so kind of between the cracks of the piano, between A and G sharp. It's a kind of a non-existent key, and then it modulates suddenly to A 440, which is a key on the piano. So it's kind of a crazy thing. Even if you don't understand what I'm talking about, I think you'll hear when it kind of just goes boom, and there's like this burst of sunlight, and the piece just lifts. It's not quite a semitone modulation, but it's like kind of a quarter tone modulation. And that piece is really crazy. It's called Home Is by Jacob Collier. Really, really cool piece. I want to do one more little exercise with you guys to kind of experiment with the way that this feels, the sensation of this all. And this is a progression that I really love doing with choirs. It's kind of a classic 2-5-6. What are we at? 2-5-1-6 kind of thing. And it sounds like this. I'll just play it once so you get the hang of it. A progression we kind of hear on the radio quite a bit. Some of my favorite songs are in that progression. And what I want you to do is just sing along with the soprano part. In any octave you like, it starts la da da da. Guys can be down the octave da 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 da. Just those two notes. And they obviously are shared across the chords. So let's just try to sing that part. La, ready, and so if you've got the notes right, this time I want you to focus on tuning. So if you are a soprano that's singing that line, or a bass in this instant, doesn't matter what part you are, but if you're singing that line, you should really be doing this if you want to temper it in the just system. If you listen again, a really bright minor third, a very low seventh, a low third here, and then a really, well, just a little bit bright fifth there. So we're depending on the function in the chord, we're thinking about the way that we tune that function, that interval. It's really interesting. So this time I want you to keep an ear out for that, especially on the very first, those two chords that happen, the E minor to the A7. If you're the G in those two chords, you're actually sinking 47 cents. There's a 47 cents difference. That's basically an entire quarter tone. So we'll start that again, and just pay attention and sing along this time, but actually pay attention to the way that feels, just sinking down into the correct slots there. Here we go again. Ready? I'm just brightening it. So really bright minor third here. Sinking it. And then brightening it ever so slightly. And I think that's just a really interesting sensation. And it's kind of the kind of thing that, I don't expect you all to actually be able to sing minus 31 cents on that second chord. I certainly can't do it. Actually, for this exercise, what I've done is melodined my voice. It's a computer program that allows you to sing all the parts, and then you can choose the exact amount of cents to sync or sharpen each note. Melodyne is the program that all like the pop stars use, like Britney Spears and stuff, to auto-correct their voice. It's kind of I call it like a pitch tailoring software. It's not auto-tune. It allows you to choose the vibrato rate and also exactly how low things need to be. So I've actually inputted, for that seventh there, that on that A7 chord, I've inputted -31 cents on the G, and it just goes and just syncs it ever so slightly. So we can actually hear what it sounds like if it were to be sung correctly. So I don't expect you to be able to hear this kind of stuff and to sing this stuff, but it's kind of just about experimenting and finding that sensation of syncing these notes into the slots that they actually naturally ring in. Before we take a few questions, I just want to open up one more little thing here. Just have to open up a different session and talk about, let's see here. Well, these are different things. I want to talk about undertones. Here we go. So there's this amazing thing called the undertone series, which is exactly the flip of that overtone series, the harmonic series we learned earlier. So this is the overtone series. Remember, we have that C, and then a C above that, then the fifth, then the C again, then the third, fifth, all that stuff. If you mirror that, you get the undertone series, which follows the exact same intervals, but just as the flip side of that. Just need to open the correct thing here. And I'll play some examples of what undertones sound like. So you can also, just like you can harmonic sing, go all that cool stuff, you can also undertone sing. And here's a bass doing a technique called strobos, which is something I did in my little tenor bass sectional, which what you can do is sing one note, and an octave beneath that, you'll start to hear the undertone emphasized. So here's a guy that can sing down to the fourth subharmonic. So he's starting here, then you hear this one appear, the first subharmonic, the third, and then the fourth. You get, actually, so this would be the fourth subharmonic, so he actually gets that A flat down there. So here's what that sounds like. And then we're back to the beginning. And that's actually it's a technique. It's kind of like vocal fry. But what you're doing is I sort of noticed it when a lot of my friends were talking. Especially like my friends from California and Michigan, we tend to kind of fry out the voice a little bit like this when we're talking, which is actually not very good for you if you do it a lot. But if you do it really, really kind of easily and not put very much pressure on the chords, you can get this octave that appears underneath, and you can keep going. So you get something like. And if you mess around with a vowel, then you can make it actually sound like a super bassy note. So you can go, but I'm only singing this note. And you can go really, really low. So it's just kind of the exact same thing as the overtone series, but we're emphasizing the flip side of that. Maybe mess around with it a little bit. I think vocal experimentation is amazing until it starts to feel bad. So once again, have some fun at home, mess around with that a little bit, but don't do it to kill yourself. We want to make sure that you can still sing your part for Caledonia here, guys. So have fun with that. But also there's ways that we can emphasize this stuff in voce sé as well. So for instance, there's a piece we sing called The Deer's Cry, which I've got up here. It sounds like this. Here's where the excerpt starts here. Bar 4. Now some of you might have heard that last chord there. You might have heard it sound like there's a bass going way down there on the tonic, way down there on the low E. But there's no bass singing that, and that's because it's an undertone effect. If you temper this chord, this is just an E7 chord. If you temper it with that seventh, let's look at the D natural there on the screen. If you temper that seventh with the harmonic system, -31 cents, and that third is -14 cents, just as we talked about the harmonic series, the ear will begin to perceive this undertone ringing with the fundamental of the chord. So it's really interesting. So I've actually done my own little version of this here, just starting from bar 4. If you want to, you can sing along with the alto part, which is that alto 2 part, which starts on that C natural. Christ, but it sounds like this. Christ with me. Christ with me. That's quite low, but what you may hear is that way down there, a bass singing that note. No one's singing that. And that effect is kind of an illusion. It's a psychoacoustic phenomena because we're tuning everything in that system. But there's plenty of examples we can get into about this. I mean, we do quite a bit of this kind of stuff with Voces 8. Another one that we could use is Drop, Drop, Slow Tears, which I have up on the page. I really like barbershop examples because I think they're just great ways to hear this sort of harmony. So I've got this. This is just a classic tag I love singing. Close your eyes, close your eyes in sleep. So if we're singing along with that top part, which goes, close your eyes in sleep. Just try to sing that with me. It goes 3, 5, 4, 4, 3. Close your eyes in sleep. When we get to the 5 chord, which happens after that, when we work on close your eyes, what I want you to do is just sync it to be that negative 31 cents seventh. So it'll go, close your eyes in sleep. And we'll just play along with the part here. So it starts on close, or you can be down here, guys. You can go close your eyes. Ready? And close your eyes. Here it comes. In sleep. Nice job. But if you do that correctly, you may hear a low, even though there's no low bass going, eyes on that last chord. No one's singing eyes in that chord. You may hear that note appearing because of the intonation of that. I do want to take some time for questions. So maybe think of a question right now. I'll just go into one more little thing. We don't have enough time to really delve into the geekiness of this all. But in Voces 8, we also talk quite a bit about the function of notes in chords and how to tune certain sonorities. So for instance, I've got a few examples up here. Let's see. So this first one here is a piece by Jonathan Dove in Beauty May I Walk, a really, really beautiful piece. And this chord here, you'll see is kind of you see this D major, this is bass clef. So you have the 3rd here, the 5th here, the tonic here, and then this 9th on top. This nice shimmery little 9th. And it sounds like this. I'll point out when the chord happens. It's about to happen in just a minute. So we could look at this chord like, oh, let's just all just sing our individual notes. Well, actually, we need to make sure that the root of the chord is emphasized, which in this case happens to be that D natural. So it's way up in the alto voice. But what we want to hear is ba, that note ringing. So if we do it correctly, and we temper those notes exactly right, the 3rd, that F sharp has to be a little bit low, and the D needs to be really emphasized in that chord. It'll sound like this. And then we get the low fundamental ringing as well. So it's about kind of finding the right names to kind of call these chords. Here's a piece a chord at the end of a Jake Runestad piece called "Let My Love Be Heard." Really, really beautiful piece. Let my love So we could look at this. Remember, this bottom one is in bass clef. We could look at this and see, well, I see E major in that chord, and I see maybe it's like E major with some added notes because we have this E here, a B here, then a G sharp on top, and maybe the C sharp and the A are just added notes. Well, that wouldn't be very successful because the chord that we want the audience to perceive is an A major 7, an A major 9 chord with this stuff stacked. So the important things are this A and the E, which gives us our root and fifth, then our third here in the C sharp, the alto part, and then these two notes, the ninth is a color, and the major 7th, the G sharp, is also a color. So if we temper it correctly, it'll sound like this. It's really satisfying. We really want to hear these parts here. Major triad, and then we add in the ninth, the major 7th, as little colors on top of that. We can really keep going, but I want to kind of wrap up and not go way too much over the hour. But there's plenty of examples I've got here of different chords we can think about tuning. It gets way more dense when you talk about dominant harmony and stacking, these tritones with our sometimes rootless voicings. But for now, I think that's kind of enough information to get you all thinking, maybe slightly, experimenting with different things at your own choir rehearsals, or just as you're practicing your part for Caledonia, or whatever piece you happen to be singing with Stay Home Choir. That you may just have something else to think about and try some experimenting. So hopefully that's been interesting. Do we have any questions anybody wants to ask? I know that we're kind of going over the hour here, but if you want to leave, you definitely can. Anybody else have any questions? I'm happy to answer some. Let's see here.
Open it up to the floor. Stick something in the chat or give us a wave if you'd like to ask Blake a question. I've been sat here attempting that strobe bass vocal fry thing for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, me too. I can see in the chat someone's asking if it does work for female voices. I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I haven't been able to flip one down yet.
Yeah, I have some female friends that can do it. But it's not. I think it's not as noticeable sometimes because it's up at a higher pitch. So you're kind of way up here, like that's the kind of sound you're listening for. Is that octavization technique happening? But just don't like I said, don't hurt yourself. It's really a very relaxing, easy sensation. It's not like there are other types of throat singing that are much more difficult. The kind of guttural, that kind of singing that is a bit more taxing on the chords. So this one is a bit easier, I think. Strobos, as they say in German.
No,
any other questions?
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's not worth the paperwork. Give us a wave if you'd like to ask a question, or stick it in the chat. Indeed.
Octavus, yes, indeed.
Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hi. Well, thank you very much, Blake, for that. I got a question, way off actually, but if in many countries they don't use the semitone-based scale like we do,
right?
But they have the same physical harmonics in their surroundings and in their bodies. Is it known whether they also experiment in a similar way?
Well, I think that's a very. I've also been kind of considering that over time. I mean, I think that this intrinsic sense of triad, kind of is it's just in all of our bodies, that natural triad, the harmonic series. But with other cultures, you have some really interesting harmony that comes into play. Oftentimes I get asked do you really think that an entire choir can sing a third minus 31 cents or something like that? Like an entire section, is that really possible? And I do think it is, because if you listen to choral groups from other countries, they're singing within their temperament systems, exactly as like the thirds and sevenths and the sixes are all in different temperaments, and they're all doing it in unison. So I think that it's something that anybody can do, any choir can do it. But I don't really know about it. I mean, I think that once again, triads are kind of intrinsic to all music, but every single country and every single culture has its own little flavor. I think certainly, with jazz music, which is kind of characterized a lot of Western culture, we have this system of equal temperament. And like I said, I wouldn't recommend tuning the harmonics in that equal tempered system. But in the same way, I think other cultures have that kind of their own little flavor of intonation as well. So I think we become kind of used to it over life. But that's a really good question, something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. So yeah, and so awesome that your mind immediately went there. Great question.
Fab. Now I'm aware of the time. Would you be happy for one more, Blake? Let's do a quick fire one, perhaps.
Absolutely,
Give us a
no
wave
problem.
if you've got a question for Blake. I can see a few of you. Let's scroll through. Jesse, this is going to be a good one, I hope. How you doing?
Thanks. This is a question that I came up with before the session. So when all I knew was it's like extended techniques and stuff.
Yeah.
So my question was like, because we've been talking here about tuning and the sort of the well-known, I guess, like important ensemble skills are like, you know, tuning, blending tone and vowels, and listening to your other singers around you. But I was just wondering if you had any sort of more underrated skills that you thought were just as important to be aware of.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, you brought up a really good point with the vowels. I think that's one that is often missed when vowels aren't aligned, you know, things sound heinous basically. But other really interesting things, I think, I mean, we all have to think about text is we have the gift as singers to emote the text on the page. And I think that's we even in Voce 8 sometimes fall victim to that trap of just like focusing on intonation and rhythms and phrasing that we just actually aren't emoting the point that, you know, as singers, that's our number one mission is to find ways to get the text across. So I think that's one thing we can definitely think about more. It's a skill that I think makes, if you're interested in getting into professional choral singing, it's a skill that immediately makes you more valuable, is the ability to get across the message in the poetry. And some singers have it and some singers don't, but I think it is something you can work on, you know, and actually just thinking about the text and figuring out the important words to bring through, all that kind of stuff. But really quickly, I do have some examples of what can happen if vowels go awry in the music. So if you happen to be singing a different vowel in a piece, what can happen is you actually get overtones because every single vowel has different formants and harmonics and things like that. So what happens is you get really, really out of tune. The vowel actually ends up being out of tune. So here's an example here. So like this is just let's see, it's a major seventh sonority. But if the bass were doing some weird throat singing thing and accentuating the seventh harmonic. So for instance, that sounds like this. We know what that sounds like going. You guys hear that? That's happening from that low note there. I'll play it one more time. That really high whistle. If that was in the context of a major seventh chord, where we need, we have that kind of sound, and the bass happened to be going like something weird, you'd get this kind of thing happening. Really gnarly stuff happens, and that's kind of a weird example because I mean usually basses aren't going on the bottom. I mean maybe if it's really high, but there's other examples where you know, like a classic minor six, kind of like a minor four add natural six chord, like a minor, yeah, just a minor six chord would sound like this. This kind of thing can happen. So here. When actually the chord is here, da do ba ba da da do do. That's our chord, do 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 da. And then suddenly here, do da happening in the harmonics because of one part that just has a little bit of a weird vowel. And it's caused because of this guy. You know, and I think this is actually something we need to talk about more because many singers, when they're put in a difficult part of their range, do weird things with their voice to go, and if the vowel's ah, and they're singing, then all of a sudden you get these weird harmonics that are accentuating to make the chord sound way out of tune, even if they're singing the perfect note. So there's plenty of different layers you can kind of apply to this stuff. But yeah, going back to your extra skills, text is hugely important, but also lining up vowels, incredibly important to line up those vowels. Otherwise, you get weird overtones happening like that. So anyways, guys, I think probably should wrap up the session because we've gone 8 minutes over. Some of you it's probably lunchtime or something.
But I think it's so lovely that you've brought it back after all of this geeky chat, which is absolutely fantastic. And to be honest, it has been such an interesting session for me and for Jamie to watch. We've been WhatsApping us each other little clips of us attempting to do various different weird things. But it's so lovely to bring it back to the creative considerations that we need to have. And at the end of the day, you know, the emotional connection that we need to have to the music. All of this stuff is hugely interesting, and it can all be used just to make your service of the text and your service of the poetry even greater. So thank you so much, Blake, for joining us and for giving your enormous amounts of expertise. And I think in traditional stay-at-home choir fashion, can we give Blake an enormous jazz hands for sharing his session with us? Thank you so much, Blake. It's been wonderful.
Great to see all you guys. Thanks for tuning in.
And we'll see you soon, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
See you soon, everyone. Bye.